regular meeting for the City of Wyoming, Minnesota, June 4th, 2024. Let the record reflect we do have a quorum. Member Luker, Member Schilling, Member Yeager, and Mayor Iverson are present. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I always like to thank Councilmember Schilling for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance, as he is a veteran, so we appreciate that. All right, next on our agenda is open forum. Open forum is an opportunity for members of the public to address the City Council on items that are or are not on the current agenda. Items requiring council action may be deferred to staff or boards and commissions for research and future council agendas if appropriate. You will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask that you conduct yourself in a professional, courteous manner and refrain from the use of profanity. Failure to abide by this policy may result in the loss of your privilege to speak. We do have a public hearing after this on the road, so you'll have time to speak. Is there anybody here that wants to speak on anything else that is not for the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll move on to number one of our agenda. Number one is to consider approving the minutes of the regular meeting of the Wyoming, Minnesota City Council for May 21st, 2024. If there are no questions or comments, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve by Member Luker. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Schilling. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Number two on the agenda, I'll read that. We're going to have a presentation, and then we'll go into our public hearing. So number two is to consider Resolution 240650, a resolution ordering the project and authorizing the preparation of plans and specifications for the 2024 street improvement project. Mr. Erickson, you're going to lead us in on this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. This presentation is very similar, verbatim actually, to previous ones that we've had at a neighborhood meeting held previously. So I'll quickly go through that. I know there are residents, I recognize a number of them that were here previously, but we will go through that and certainly be available for questions and then move into the public hearing portion of the meeting. Next slide. Oh, I'm doing that. All right, again, project location, you can see on the screen, 258th Street, Goodwin Road, Goodwin Lane, 255th Street, Gramford Avenue, Granada Avenue, and Grafton Avenue. Everything highlighted in red is proposed as to be reconstructed as part of this project. Well, sorry. This is really the project schedule that we've identified. It is not exact, something that we've worked through. There's a little bit of play in the schedule depending on a number of factors, and we'll highlight those. But we have been ordered to prepare the feasibility study. We held an informational meeting for property owners to really understand what the public improvement process is, what that consists of, how the City of Wyoming moves through that process, and really try to get information from residents to see what they want to see out of this project as well. We've identified the project, but really wanted to make sure that we were aware of any drainage issues or any other concerns that we could make sure to include in that feasibility study. The council at its May 7th meeting received the feasibility study and set the public hearing. And then the last meeting that we had on this topic was a public informational meeting on May 28th. And that was really to give the property owners an opportunity to see the results of the feasibility study, to prepare them for the meeting tonight so they could formulate questions and pose those to council. So with that brings us to this evening, the public hearing, which property owners will have the opportunity to speak and ask questions. You can see the remaining schedule is pretty aggressive to move forward with the plans and specifications, the bidding of the plans and specifications, receiving the bids, moving forward with construction, likely in that end of July, August timeline, if the council elects to move forward this evening. So with that, I'll move on to the next slide. A little background, again, for those that haven't participated in some of the previous meetings. Wyoming has aggressively undertaken street improvements really over the last 10 to 15 years, really taking on a number of projects. And this happens to be one of our next highest priority. And how do we arrive at our priorities? We do street ratings every 3 years where we actually count the distresses within the pavements throughout the entire community, and they all receive a score. And that was one method, and this was one of our highest priorities based on that. We've also based that on council and staff and public works experience, calls and complaints, and road tours that we all go on and evaluate the roadways. And so a combination of all of those things is really how we developed a 5-year capital improvements plan that really identified this as our next highest priority. The streets were originally constructed back in the 1980s and 1990s, and so they have gone through their entire life cycle. They are on the tail end of that, and Public Works has spent an awful lot of time over the last number of years trying to keep those together. And so we're at a point now where we're all recommending to council that we at least look and evaluate this through our public improvement process. Due to the surface and subsurface, again, we are looking at complete pavement removal. This isn't a pavement preservation type project. It's not a mill and overlay. The condition is such that it warrants the complete removal of the pavement. There are minor drainage improvements that have been a concern that we will address with this project. And they are relatively limited, but we did televise all the storm sewer, I should say, and did get some feedback from property owners, and we are addressing those concerns with this project. The next few slides are really just photos that really highlight the pavement condition, and the pictures really don't do it justice. I think there's been chip seals and patches on top of patches, but certainly this last year was a really degraded year in 2023. That winter over 2023 was really hard on a lot of our city streets. And so our proposed improvements really involve complete pavement removal. We looked at and evaluated, is this a reclamation project where we can just grind up the pavement with the underlying aggregate, leave everything in place? In some cases, yes, that works. In some cases, that doesn't work. And so it might be a little bit of a combination as we get into final design, but we simply can't raise the roadway 4 inches everywhere. And we were hoping we'd be able to do that just to save costs and things like that. But driveways are very flat. We just can't raise that, or we'll trap water back in people's yards and things of that nature. So we want to make sure that we're conscious of that as well. We've identified other portions of the project to receive concrete curb and gutter. There's an existing urban section roadway, meaning there's no ditches, and it has old asphalt curbs. They're not really visible much anymore. They've been worn over the years, and so that is one option that had been evaluated as part of this. And we did have a resident question related to bituminous curb, and I'll cover that a little bit later. The rural sections, the portions that don't have that curb and gutter and have ditches, will remain that way. A number of areas really don't have ditches, but we aren't hearing from property owners, and we've asked them. We're not hearing any drainage concerns, even though there's not ditches or curb and gutter, but it does fall off the roadway. We're not seeing standing water. We have pretty sandy soils, and it infiltrates, so we're not seeing that as an issue. And really the road widths will match what exists out there today for the most part. As far as drainage, again, we are maximizing the use of the existing ditches to the greatest extent practical. There is some expansion of drainage systems that are there just for the fact that it's not working today. We want to extend a small portion of the storm sewer to pick up some areas that aren't really functioning that well today. And then we have talked about the storm sewer where there's some deficiencies based on our review of the televising tapes. We had a camera go through those, and there's some minor things that we want to correct while we're here, rather than build a roadway on top of something and have to correct that later. And then we also talked a little bit with Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. There's possibility to enhance this project with regard to water quality. This would be funded by them if they're inclined to move forward with that. We will work with them. We've talked to the property owner that where this opportunity exists, and they are in favor of it and would grant an easement. So we're looking to work with the Watershed District on that, whether that's something that we take on as part of our contract or we help facilitate with the Watershed District. We don't know the answer to that, but that will be discussed here at a quarterly meeting that we have with the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District here later this week. Next slide. Sorry, I'm so used to you doing this. Again, our proposed improvements are really matching this street width. You can see it's 28 feet in width with surmountable concrete curb and gutter is what we've identified. The rural section roadway, again, is much narrower. It's 24 feet in width, so it's about 4 feet narrower in width. And then again, no curb and gutter. We're just gonna use the ditches that are present there to convey the stormwater. Our project funding is that we do assess 20% of the surface and drainage improvements only. This is based on the city's assessment policy. This has been a long-standing assessment policy where we assess the minimum amount that we can. So again, 20% is the minimum we can when we're bonding for improvements. And so the city has chosen to have a uniform assessment rate for all projects of 20%. And it is based on a unit, and when I say a unit, it means how many houses could go on that property. And so it's a buildable unit. We don't have any parcels within the assessment area that would receive more than one assessment. We have in the past where we've had multiple assessments just based on the size. And that's really to take into consideration the size of the parcel. We've evaluated as part of that process, do we want to go with front footage or unit? And I think the council all unanimously felt it was most fairly applied to go with a unit assessment rather than based on front footage. And then the city pays the remaining 80% of the project costs. So there are two areas, and you can see area 1 is identified as the rural section, the green area. And again, assessments are based on where your driveway takes access. And so you would be assessed if your driveway accesses any of these roadways that are identified to be reconstructed. So we look at the total cost of area 1 in green at $1,068,000 and change. We multiply that by that 20%, and we come up with a total amount to be assessed of $213,716. And we divide that by the total number of units within that green area of 35, and we end up with an assessment of $6,106.18. This is an estimate based on our quantities that we've identified for this and what we estimate those costs to be. This is something that will be evaluated at the conclusion of the project if it moves forward, but we actually base them on actual costs, not our estimates. And so oftentimes these estimates have been a little bit on the higher side and the assessments have come in a little bit lower. I cannot guarantee that, but that's just what trends we've been seeing with our estimating and what the bidding climate has been. Our area 2 is the urban area, the area that is identified in blue. That is the concrete curb and gutter area. You can see again that 20% assessed. We have a project cost for that area of just shy of 1.7 million. 20% of that is about $339,000 divided by the total number of units in that area of 52. That yields an assessment of $6,525.43. A question was raised by a property owner. What would it be if we had bituminous curb and gutter, right? There's a comment related to that, and I wasn't really sure. We had to do some checking. Of course, the cost variation is, again, the $6,525 versus the $6,106. So again, about just over $400, if I can get this to go. $400 difference. Again, this roadway is 4 foot wider, so part of that increase in cost comes from that. Part of it comes from the increase in the concrete versus the bituminous curb. And so it's certainly not that entire $400. It's probably more in line of $175 to $200 to have that increase in that assessment to have the concrete curb and gutter. It's something that I feel that I'm pretty passionate about, the concrete versus the bituminous. That's something certainly that the council can weigh and discuss. The reason, and I'll give a couple of reasons for that, and I understand, the desire to keep costs down. I certainly understand that and can appreciate that. But longevity is important for me as well, and I think you can see the curb, what it looks like now. I can go through countless examples in other communities as well where you have that, and it doesn't hold up nearly as long. It does not perform as well with grade as well. So when we look at concrete curb and gutter, it can be laid as flat as 0.5% of grade. because it's put in with a string line and a concrete curb machine, and it just has much more control over grade for drainage purposes. Where when you're looking at a paver, it typically requires about twice of that to make sure that you're maintaining drainage. And a lot of these areas are flat, and so I just want to make sure that we end up with a high quality project as well. And so those are my comments related to that. Considering the cost, I think the benefits far outweigh the cost savings, in my opinion. But I'm certainly happy to discuss that further if anybody would like to. As far as the assessment process, again, it does follow Minnesota State Statute Chapter 429. That process is laid out in great detail, what cities are needing to do and how they need to follow that process for assessments. We do follow that. We do exceed those requirements by having these other neighborhood meetings. We've had multiple neighborhood meetings. Those are not requirements as part of this process, but we know that we are much more successful when we engage the public and engage the property owners that are adjacent to these improvements and get their feedback. And so we feel that's important, and we do go above and beyond with that regard. There will be, if the project moves forward, there would be an assessment hearing that would take place this fall. That would receive similar notice, right, in the local paper and mailed notice to all the property owners, and there'd be a lot of instructions that go along with that. Written objection of appeal must be presented in writing and signed by the property owner prior to or at that assessment hearing. And so that's a right that property owners have to appeal the assessment. That would need to go and be filed with Chisago County courts within 30 days after the adoption of the assessment. So property owners do have further rights related to that. We just want to highlight that. That would be included in that letter, all of the information with your rights and what assessment rates are, what the assessment amount is. All of those things would be included. Interest rate is set at the time of the assessment certification. Last year's rate was 5.25%. This is a project that I believe if we do move forward with, we would be bonding for. Is that correct, Mr. Linwood? And so there's a typical rate that we would, well, it's a process in which we would receive interest rates in the borrowing of that money, and we would be able to determine that at that time. Assessments would be paid over a 10-year period. Interest rate, again, is determined at the time of the assessment hearing. Property owners do have the right to pay off that assessment without interest within 30 days after the adoption of the assessments. So we sit on those assessments. Property owners have the right to prepay those without interest prior to the city certifying those with Chisago County. If a property owner does not do that, the balance of property owners that have not prepaid would all be sent and certified with Chisago County and be applied directly to property taxes. And again, that would be paid over a 10-year period. Here are just a couple examples. Again, one of the $6,106 assessment, what those total payments would be to Chisago County over that 10-year period. And then again, in another example here for the $6,525 assessment. Again, this is just a slide that I'd like to share kind of where we're at with the process. We're right here, if you can see the mouse moving here, or the arrow here. We're at the point of holding the public hearing, so we're roughly halfway through that public improvement process. The next step would be receiving bids and would be receiving plans and specifications and authorizing the advertisement for bids. So with that, I'll stand for any questions that council may have prior to opening for the public hearing.
Okay. Questions from council? We'll start with Member Luker.
No questions.
Okay. Member Yeager.
Did you say that the road was going to be a little narrower?
We're gonna match the existing roadway widths to the greatest extent practical. For the most part, it will be exactly. It varies, so I can't say that it'll match exactly everywhere, but it'll be a uniform 24-foot in width and 28 feet in width.
Okay, because my concern was if it was narrowed in places, when the property owners had like a grad party or some workmen over, then the street, I mean, I noticed it on my street. It was narrowed after it was reconstructed. And now, if there's a party or if even somebody's doing work, it's almost impossible to get through with when you have somebody parking on both sides of the street.
Yeah, so like I said, the width does vary some, but, you know, on average, I would say the roadway is 24 feet in width for the rural section and 28 feet for the urban section. And so that's what we're putting back in.
So-
That's what the width will be,
Folks shouldn't see that problem occurring.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Member Schilling?
I do not have any questions, thank you.
All right, and I have none either. So we are going to go into the public hearing. We need a motion to go into public hearing.
So moved.
We have a motion by Member Schilling. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Luger. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are in public hearing. So what that means is you'll be able to come up. We usually try to limit about 3 minutes for you to come on up. We do ask that you be respectful. You'll say your name and your address. So do we have somebody who would like to come up for the public hearing? Please come on up, state your name and your address.
Hi, I'm Kristen Ortworth, and I live at 25730 Granford Avenue in Wyoming. And I just have some questions. So obviously, it's frustrating when there is a lack of accountability and things we believe we've already paid for, we are now incurring a cost for the second time. With us living in what was once the township, where we don't have city sewer, water, or corner lights, or streets that are rarely plowed and I rarely see police patrol. We feel like our taxes are high for the services we do get, and in asking us to pay more was a very unpleasant surprise. It does make me ponder a few things. Is there a line item in the budget to pay for upgrades to the roads?
What was the question?
Is there line items in your city budget to pay for roads?
We have essentially a year, but we have a long-term plan, a CIP plan, as most cities do. So we have a capital improvement plan. As Mr. Erickson stated, our capital improvement plan, we work through the lowest amount possible for assessments for community members of 20%. There are communities where it's opposite of that even, so we do try to limit that to the most. But we do have line items within our budget for street maintenance, but then we have a 5-year CIP plan that we work with to develop with the council. And then those are essentially, we've done some projects we'll try to pay in cash, or we'll try to use state aid. And then there are projects where we have to do bonding. We try to kind of collaborate those through the years and be strategic with our funding points. But on these type of projects, in this one particular, we do have to bond for this particular project.
Because I do know other cities, I was gonna say personally with several friends from different cities, that they've had complete road work done in front of their houses and they had to pay nothing else. So to me, that sounds like it's just not funding that was really well budgeted. And we all have those issues that we have a budget to live in, and this is a big extra expense. Should property owners then be preparing for other things you propose to do that will not be included in our property taxes? Currently, we thought that everything that would be done would be part of our property taxes that we're already paying. And now we found out that this isn't it, and this we thought would be a standard thing. So what other things can we expect that you guys are planning to do that we're gonna have to pay additional on top of that?
So right now, we're just discussing the road project.
I know, but
So
I'm just talking
questions
about
to
in
that.
general, in the cities, because say that's something that would be nice to know as a homeowner, like when you move into this town, is it like, well, anytime your road's being improved, now this is gonna be something else. If they're gonna add sewer and water, this is something else you're paying for. It would be very nice to know, it's gonna say, because everyone does have a budget, and it's gonna say, and adding $6,500 to a budget is a large dent in a budget. So when did the procedure then, it's gonna say you're talking about the city assessments, it's gonna say to charge the property owners an additional cost of the road. So that is because you guys don't have the correct funding necessary, so that way you guys are using these Minnesota statutes that was the Minnesota statute?
It's statute 429. So that would be common practice. You may have a city that does pay, maybe you don't have to pay an assessment for. I would say there are less cities that do that. And usually most cities, those assessment percentages are much higher. Example, city of Stillwater is 80% towards the resident, or Chisago City is usually 50 or 60% of those road project costs. So we are at the low end. It's not necessarily, I can't say it's something that where we don't budget it. The council could, if they elected to put large amounts of money into our capital improvement for our streets, but you would essentially see that on your taxes if we raised the levy every year for what the project would be. That would be directly, you'd be paying for maybe someone else in the city for a project. So if we had a $3 million project and that was within the levy, then that would be spread out amongst all our taxpayers, and you'd see significant increases in your property taxes. So this is pretty standard how most cities operate in regards to how we do that. So this road has been on our CIP for quite some time. That CIP list is on our city website. So we encourage people to look at that. This one originally was scheduled as of about 3 years ago for 2027. Due to the condition, we do evaluate those with the city council every year. So this was moved up due to the poor condition, as we felt, as Mr. Erickson explained. We try to look at those and do an inventory of those and the conditions of the streets. So we bring those forward based on priority every year.
I was gonna say, so I understand that, it's gonna say, but still, it's just the fact that people didn't budget to have that allocated. Just because it's best practices doesn't mean it's a good practice. So has there been road work then completed in the city streets in the last 10 years and the property owners weren't charged for an additional fee for it? Just like last summer they did road work down their thing and they did a really poor job, unfortunately. But they paved a road going out on Grafton. That whole road was redone. I mean, not saying that was done well.
Radiator Springs is what we call it.
And so did they get charged for that?
That was this patching that they
But
did
that
on.
wasn't mud
Whole
patching.
overlay.
That was a complete overlay.
Well, there's,
Whole overlay.
Mr. Erickson, can you describe overlay versus,
Yeah, so again, that was a public works project that we did not hire out. That was a public works project where they did I would say and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I know we've looked at that, but it was almost like a skin patch, right? I mean, it wasn't a structural support. It was something to get that roadway by. They will be, at some point in the future, part of a road improvement project there as well, and they would be assessed at that time. That is something that we have not assessed for overlays or, patching or things like that. It was a large-scale project, but they put it down with a skid steer and compacted it just to get that roadway down the road a little bit further, because it wasn't on our 5-year CIP, and we knew it wouldn't hold together, so Public Works had gone through and done some patching. But as far as all of our roadway improvement projects that we've had, there haven't been any, as far as the ones that we entertained through this 429 process, there hasn't been any projects, any road projects that have been built where there haven't been assessments on them.
I was gonna say, so when you guys are figuring these roads, I was gonna say, and so you guys are just doing strictly on the roads that are in front of the people's houses, not considering the traffic where it comes from? Like specifically, like where we live, there are a lot of dead-end roads, and those, we get higher traffic because there's no outlets that were planned in those city streets. And so then those roads, it's gonna say that there's no outlets, obviously will not have to get repaired nearly as much as ours. And so I think that is not something that, I think it should be something that's considered. How long do you expect this estimate this new proposed road to last? So if we get and go through this proposal, how long is gonna say, are we expecting this to last?
So this roadway should last in that 30-year range. It will include other maintenance that occurs over that time period. It certainly will not last untouched, right? And so as far as assessments, property owners would not be assessed for anything within the next 15 years. For certain, that's part of our assessment policy. But roadways would require mill and overlay or crack filling or some sort of surface treatment to preserve the roadway and protect it from oxidation, things of that nature. So there will be ongoing maintenance things, but those things are not assessed. Those
things, it's gonna say you guys charge on top of everything else too?
So I just said those are not assessed. Those are things that would be done by our public works staff or hired by our public works staff to come in and do crack filling and things like that. That is not charged to the homeowner. It is part of something that Mr. Linwood had indicated earlier is levied, right? It is something that the city does have to expend funds to preserve the condition of the roadway and extend the life of the roadway. And so those are activities that Public Works employs to make sure that these roads do last.
So, but when you guys do the seal coating and stuff like that, is you're trying to tell me that if my road gets seal coated, then we would actually have to pay extra for that, or I'm sorry?
No.
That is
No,
not assessed.
not at all.
Okay, that was great to know. So then, should we expect another assessment to be done on our property once then it's completed? So will this make our taxes an increase? So then, obviously, then our street's gonna look a little better, it's gonna say, because we're gonna be paying this money to have this road done. Will that then increase the value of our house, which then again increases our taxes again?
we don't assess your house, that's county. So that would be something you'd have to talk to county about or the state, but we do not, the city does not assess your house. We don't value your house, if that makes sense. So that's not something the city does, that's county and state.
And so then when I was here on the 5-7 meeting, I was gonna say, I saw that there was a surplus at the end, I was gonna say, things. So what happens with that surplus money? Is that something that then can be redirected to the road projects, knowing that you're hitting the customers or your property owners up, it's gonna say with additional charges? Is that something that you're gonna try to push back, is gonna say into the?
I don't know if we understand the additional charge part. Do you understand, what, are you
Well,
talking the
you're gonna,
interest?
you're planning to charge us $6,500, that's an additional charge.
No, but again, let me just explain, when we were here on 5/27, that was the annual budget for city council.
The annual audit, you mean?
The annual.
The audit.
Yeah, so we saw a surplus.
Sure.
So of course you wonder where your surplus goes, just like your snowplow surplus for this winter. You had a snowplow surplus. You didn't plow the roads once on any of the back roads. So you had to have a surplus, a fuel charge surplus. I mean, I'm sorry, I've been in construction 30 years, and asphalt don't hold 30 years. I don't care where you lay it, Minnesota's not gonna last. 15 is max. And the state should have done studies on that. You should have all the evidence to back that all up. Soil borings, you talk about soil borings. You say it's sandy. I'm on clay. 6 inches of black sandy dirt, and then I'm in clay. So I'm kind of curious to know what the soil borings are, because I'm
Sure.
familiar with soil borings. But that's kind of the question is, we know the things aren't gonna last. We understand we have to pay for this, and we're not arguing the pay factor. It's just that everything is accruing. Our property taxes are accruing. Now we're getting a street. We've only been here 4 years. That road's 24 years old. How can this happen to people who move in to a new community and get hit like this?
We personally know a person in our neighborhood, it's gonna say they are selling their house because they can't afford the taxes anymore. And they were hoping to get out before this assessment, and unfortunately, they are not so lucky. It's gonna say, it's just, when I'm familiar with that, other people can do that. We all have budgets to live in. I think I'm just frustrated that you guys don't have a budget that you have to live within too. And having to assess other property owners to make them pay above and beyond for stuff, to me, that should be something that you add other things into.
So I'd like to, okay, you brought up surpluses. So before this meeting, we had our budget meeting for next year. So anytime we don't use up funds, that gets rolled into that general fund, if I'm not mistaken. And then we apply that or project to next year, so we don't have to plan for as much money. So if there is an overage, if I understand everything correctly, that would be applied to next year's costs. So then we don't have to have as much if we
Levy
had,
as much.
levy as much if we had that surplus in items.
Yeah, we essentially, a city actually being a government entity, that we are responsible to run a balanced budget. It's necessary for us, unlike some of the other forms of government. So if we do have a excess amount of that, often we have minimum reserve standards that we have to do by the Office of the State Auditor that we need to be required to have. So 55% is what our city council's policy is, and that is essentially what the state auditor recommends. So we have to have a reserve balance. That's just a requirement of the city. But if we do have reserves, those will go back into our reserve funds or potentially into a capital revolving fund, which can be used for different projects amongst the city. So it will be used back within the community. It's just a matter of, we look at all, it might be, I know you identified single line items in budget. It's not gonna, we're not gonna look year to year most likely and say, it doesn't work, we're carrying over a fuel line item from year to year. Essentially, it goes back into one clump, and then we evaluate next year for the cost of that. This year, example, in 2023 into 2022 into 2023, our plowing operations exceeded extremely. We were over in our audit, if you were here for that, and that was a large point due to the necessary patching due to that bad winter, and then also to the amount of snow events that we had. We almost had double that we usually have. So that it ebbs and flows with that budget. So our public works budget line items exceeded that year, but as you had identified this year, there were very few snow events. So in regards to those fuel, the time that our staff may incur in regards to overtime or coming in, that was down. So we try to, when we budget, we try to look at that forecast and do budgets based on some of what we see in the past. So we're try to be strategic and make sure that we have enough to keep by, even when we do have ebbs and flows throughout the year.
Well, something that, that is going to be done, is because I really feel that if you guys don't have a strong line, that eventually I think you guys' goal should be not to be charging people because they having to ask for more money on top of everything else. I'm sure that there's some families that are so tight with their money that they're going to have to get like a second job, is because they'd be paying for these things. And then having 5% interest, that is very high. And so it's just, I find it very frustrating, and I'm glad that you giving us a chance to talk and the thing, but I don't really feel like it goes anywhere, I was gonna say. So you guys wanna do what you wanna do, and you guys are gonna spend all this money, but I guess I think differently.
And if you don't, if there is, this is part of the public hearing, if you don't want the project, you can certainly state that, and if there are other individuals in the neighborhood that don't want the project, we can always, we've done it in the past where we have had things where we can shelf a project and we can always come back to it, but that is, if the neighborhood and the public hearing say, we really don't want this project, we don't have to go forward with it. So that is as a public hearing, you do have that opportunity as well.
No, we know we need the project, we understand it, as my wife's trying to point out, it's the cost, it's the occurring cost. Since we've been here 4 years, my taxes have increased so much.
$1,200.
And we're trying to figure out, 4 years, $1,200 is what my taxes have increased for the city of Wyoming. I went through my tax statements before I came, and the assessments. And I understand taxes go up, I understand the value of houses go up, but my pay don't go up like these jumps are going up. And I'm a single income family, I'm raising 3 kids, and my wife homeschools. So every time something like this comes up, I'm not saying I'm not smart enough with my money that I can't budget, but it's a hit. And when you're trying to look at retirement, I'm 10 years away from retirement. I'm looking at my funds are draining from Bidenomics and everything else that's going on, and then I get hit by the city. So that's the frustration on our part. We understand the road needs to be done, but there's 24 to 25 years other residents have lived there, and they're not getting stuck with a bill, and now I'm getting stuck with a bill. And we all know asphalt, and I'm sorry, Mark, I hope you understand. I'm not picking on you, but asphalt does not last 20 years.
No,
Or
and
even 15 years.
I think I mentioned it, if I didn't, I apologize, but it will not last that long without efforts, right? So included in that is a mill and overlay, right? So when we talk a 30-year lifespan, your pavement curve, if you're familiar with those, the condition starts to go like this, and then at some year, 15-year or 20-year, you do a mill and overlay, and it spikes back up. And so if we were to not do anything with that roadway, it would not last 30 years. But we're talking about, pavement preservation, mill and overlay. It won't last 30 years without a mill and overlay. We're gonna do crack filling and things of that nature. And so you're exactly right. Just leave it as it is. It would not last 30 years.
Right.
And so
And how thick of a layer of asphalt?
It's-
Because we all know you're gonna get better asphalt if you do it in lifts.
Right.
And they have to be small lifts, not
Yeah.
1 3-inch lift and 1 1.5 lift. It has to be an 1.5 lift.
Yeah, so, no, when we do this, we actually go through and we actually meet MnDOT standards on all compaction and densities, and we have material testing present on site for all of this. And so they are 2-inch lifts is what our city standard is.
Anything else?
Thank you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
you're welcome.
Who else would like to come up? Come on up, state your name, address. Anybody else? No? I see head shaking. Okay. All right, then we need a motion to go out of public hearing. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion to close by member Luker. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by member Schilling. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. All right, so we have number 2 again, to consider resolution 240650, a resolution ordering the project and authorizing the preparation of plans, only plans and specifications, right? For the 2024 street improvement project. So, any other questions from council? If there are none, we need a motion to approve resolution 240650.
So moved.
Motion to approve by member Schilling. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by member Luker. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Consent agenda number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Does anybody wish to pull an item from the consent agenda? Hearing none, we do need a motion to approve number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 on the consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by member Luker. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by member Schilling. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Knowledge receipt of reports of officers, boards, commissions, and department heads, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Does anybody wish to pull an item further for the reports? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business, number 15, to consider resolution 240656, a resolution governing write-in vote counting. So, Mr. Erickson, No, sorry, Mr. Linwood, Mr. McFarland,
I will-
okay.
I'll handle this one.
I'll
Just
I'll
go
just go
straight
everybody
down.
right on down. All right, so
Perfect.
we've got Mr. McFarland that's gonna go. All right,
Yeah,
awesome, thanks.
Honorable Mayor and members of council, Mr. Linwood and I were able to attend a meeting with the Chisago County Elections Office last week as we begin to gear up for the August 13th just primary election. One of the topics that was covered during this meeting was new legislation that was passed by the Minnesota legislature over the past 2 years. And one of the topics, or one of the new laws that was passed is that cities are now able to adopt a resolution that states that write-in candidates will only have their individual votes tallied if the total number of write-in votes for the contest is greater than or equal to the fewest numbers of votes cast for a non-write-in candidate. What that basically means is that if there's someone who's actually on the ballot that receives 500 votes, write-ins wouldn't have their votes individually cast unless there were 500 or 501. That's an important distinction because currently Chisago County election officials during election night count every single write-in tally. That would include the ones that mostly, they state are mostly written as Mickey Mouse, Ronald McDonald, things like that sort. This would be big for them to save time so that we're not waiting as long for election results. So it's just a possibility we want to put forth in front of you as a thing that we can look at as the city. So the resolution before you just states that they would no longer have to do that unless those tallies are more than the lowest amount for an actual candidate on the ballot.
Okay, questions from council member Schilling.
No questions.
Member Yeager?
Well, so I looked up how many write-in votes we have. So I saw in 2022, there was 73 write-in votes. 2020, 24 write-in votes for mayor, 44 write-in votes for council. 2018, 42 write-in votes for mayor, council rather. The mayor was an anomaly at 106 write-in votes. So if you're looking at 75 votes tops on how much time would be saved by not tabulating them?
I can't speak specifically to the amount of time saved there, but I can share that this was shared with all the municipalities within Chisago County, and I want to say that that might encompass, and each precinct within those, and so
Any precinct and any other, also any of, not just city council and not just mayor, it would be for anything on the ballots from our precincts. So it would be much more than just the city council and mayor
Right.
votes. It would be all the differentiating, as Mr.
Presidents,
McFarland-
Congress.
Right, as Mr. McFarland said, it was a request from the Chisago County Auditor's Office. It's, something that they asked to bring forward to the city councils.
Okay. How will voters be informed that their write-in votes won't be individually tabulated? I mean, when they come to vote, they expect, and they write in, they expect their vote to be tabulated. How will they know that they're not?
I would specify, so the write-in vote tally will still show up in the final election results. It's just rather than, it won't be reported now that 10 went to Ronald McDonald, 5 Mickey Mouse, 12 Grant McFarland, thank you. And so forth. It would just state the total number of write-in votes.
Okay. How many of those write-in votes are for Mickey Mouse or Ronald McDonald, or anything or of a nature that the staff considers frivolous?
That's a great question. I don't have an exact number, but I can state that it was high enough that the county officials felt it was pertinent to bring this to our attention.
Okay. I mean, where I am, if a person cared enough to write in a candidate for an election, that vote should be individually tabulated. What one person considers frivolous may be somebody else's political statement, and that deserves to be heard, especially when you have get out the vote efforts. Why discourage them if the vote doesn't count enough to be individually tabulated? When I look at the numbers, at least in our council and our mayor votes, with all those write-in votes, the difference between frivolous and non-frivolous votes, it's just a matter of numbers. And I can't see less than 75 votes taking up so much time that you can't individually tabulate them and still get results on a timely basis.
And I would just state once again, it's for all, and maybe that's including your number, but it's presidential, Senate, anything that's on the ballot that is receiving a write-in vote would be something that applies to this resolution, not just city council or local elections.
Okay, I stand corrected.
All right, Member Luker.
I have no questions. Actually, no, I take that back. So, this is something that Chisago County would like us to pass. Have other municipalities within the county passed this as well? Do we know?
It was just, we just received the information last week at a meeting, so I
Okay.
can't say if any others have. They were all asked, the county asked them in regards to it, that they didn't have to. I think, like they said, if there was a write-in candidate that, you know, did receive the appropriate amount of votes over another one, it would be, tabulated, and it would go forward. It was just the request from the auditor. If there is more information that the council wants from the auditor, certainly we could ask that, or if there are other questions on that, I'm sure we could get them, but just something that they brought forward that they asked us to bring to the council.
So then my follow-up question is, hypothetically, everybody else in Chisago County passes this, every other municipality in Wyoming says no. What are the implications? Like, I mean, just like logistically, what is that?
They would just have to count for, the Wyoming precincts, so you'd
Okay.
have precinct A and B, if the other ones did, I don't, when it was brought up within the election judges, I guess there really wasn't, I can't say that there was much discussion on it, other than it was just an ask from the county auditor's office. So it sounds like this is something that obviously was passed at the state legislature level, and that the example has been pushed out far and wide. So I think it's something that you're seeing other communities and other counties look at, in regards to how you may feel about it. It's just something that the state looked at and said to try to, I guess, with all the additional things through elections now, different criterias, different security measures, different times open. I'm assuming the legislature just looked at this as one less thing maybe for some of that staff to have to handle, but it is a community by community, so, if it's something you don't feel fits Wyoming, it's the council's ability to go forward with it or not go forward with it.
And to be clear, it's not that the write-in votes, however we decide whether they're frivolous or not, aren't tabulated. They still count. Every person still gets a vote. It's just that they're not identified as Mickey Mouse got 2 votes, Donald Duck got 3.
Correct. So I mean, you
Okay.
still, even if there was a large write-in campaign and that were to go forward over and above someone on the ballot, that would still be counted, and that would still, which time to time that can happen, or else in the write-in, there's a strong write-in push, and that can happen. So they would still be tabulated appropriately and correctly through that. It just wouldn't be, to your point, that it wouldn't be 17 for Donald Duck or whoever else may be. Those are some of the common ones, some of the silly ones you see. And there can be not silly though too.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Linwood, Wyoming tends to have a really high voter turnout. Chisago County does actually. It's proven statewide. With Wyoming, can you, because you run the election part of it, can you answer about how many votes are cast typically? I mean, you have the off year and then you have the presidential year. So can you maybe give kind of an idea of what those numbers are if you remember?
Well, I think registered within Wyoming, I think we have approximately, Mr. McFarland, I don't know if you can help me, I think we have about 5,500 registered voters right now in the city of Wyoming. Does that mean that they're all turn out for the election? No, not necessarily, but that is a very large amount. As you just stated, we have a very strong voter turnout in Wyoming and the county, so that's something that we can be very proud of. But as far as that number on voting day, I mean, obviously, we had very low numbers for the presidential primary. The primary, historically, we don't have real significant voter turnout on that, but then obviously this year being a general election, we have good turnout, and then a presidential election, we have extremely strong turnout. So we would anticipate that this year, and we're gearing up appropriately for that, and anticipated amount of people.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. And the ones that are written in, are those hand counted, or how does that, we have the ballot box, but are those hand counted then?
Correct, by the county staff.
Okay, and I know in several years, sometimes election results from the county or the city of Wyoming can be 11, 12 o'clock at night, because you're doing those hand countings for the Donald Ducks, or the, poor Donald Duck on this one, but Mickey Mouse, whatever you want to put in there, right?
We would not do that, but yes, the county
The
would.
county
So
does
we
that.
essentially, once the election's over, we have closing duties as a staff to do in regards to the reconciliation of the polls. So But then from there, then all those items go up to the county, which at that time, we essentially hand off to them, and then they go through the dissemination of the ballots and the different the voting machines, et cetera.
And then they're certified 2 weeks later or something. I've been on that. Where
You have preliminary results,
Mhm.
correct, and then, then they go through and you have your formal
Okay.
certified
All right.
votes, or certified results, excuse me.
Okay. Any other questions from council? All right, we need a motion to approve resolution 240656, a resolution governing write-in votes counting. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
So approved. Number 16, last on the agenda, to consider a work session on June 18th, 2024 at 5:30 PM. I would say Mr. Lunan, because I haven't asked him to talk yet, but we'll go with Mr. Linwood.
I can handle it.
True.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. This is just a request from staff. We have a couple different concept plans that have gone before the EDA for some multifamily housing, one being for senior housing, and then another one for regular multifamily housing. So we'd like to have a work session with the council to go through those concepts. That would be prior to our June 18th council meeting at 5:30, and so we're requesting the council set a work session at 5:30 PM on that day.
Okay, I'm going to ask council like I usually do. Did everybody check those dates?
Yes.
I will not be in attendance. I'll be in Grand Rapids for a conference.
Okay, so you cannot be here. Linda?
I'm fine.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve the work session on June 18th, 2024 at 5:30 PM. I'll make that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll see you at 5:30. So council reports, the best part of the night, I think. Council reports, we'll start with Member Luker.
I have no report. Thank you all for attending and thanks for watching.
All right, Member Schilling?
No report. Thank you all for showing up, voicing concerns. Have a great night. Thank you.
Member Yeager?
Oh, I stopped at Touch a Truck towards the end of it. It was cool. And thank you all for coming and voicing your opinions, and thank you all for watching.
All right. I also attended Touch a Truck, and I'd like to thank all the vendors that came out. It was big. It was really big. There was a lot of people. It was exciting to see that. I've also attended the EDA yesterday, and then hearing obviously what we're going to be talking about is some new projects that are coming to Wyoming, which again is very exciting. Workforce housing, which is what we need based on all the manufacturers that we have here in the county. Or in our city, actually. And then two super fun things. I want to talk about the MS-150. The state chair actually reached out to me. The MS-150 is this coming Saturday and Sunday. It's usually over 1,000 bikes that run through. They come right through our city, and they're looking for volunteers. I am always there with a cowbell and cheering them on, but they're also looking for help in the tent, for the hydration tent. They're looking for anybody certified in first aid to kind of follow the riders as they go along. So looking for anybody who wants to come down, cheer on the riders. Honestly, I just got an email from one of the riders that I've talked to every year, and he's asking me if I was going to be there. And I'm like, I sure will be there. So anybody has any questions with that, check out my Facebook page or get a hold of me. The other thing that I am attended today, which I don't think a lot of people know, and that's called Project Search. Project Search is a project that's done at Fairview currently. It has 7 interns every year. It changes over. The 7 interns, 8 interns, could be up to 10. They do have disabilities, but it's internships that will show them or teach them how to work within a hospital system or how to work cash register, how to build different things. They learn how to use tools. They learn how to greet people and come out of their shell and talk to people. So 2nd year attending, this year I got to go to their graduation. I want to say congratulations to Robert, Tori, Libby, Emmanuel, Andrew, Maria, and Charlie. Great job that you guys did this last year. So with that, I think Touch Truck vendors are on the website, right? So we'll be able to thank them. All right. All right, so with that, thanks everybody for being here. We do appreciate you coming and talking to us about your concerns. We do need a motion to adjourn. We have a motion to adjourn from Member Luger. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Member Schilling. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And we are adjourned at 7:57.
So we're still on to see our issues closing down the line.
Okay.